Good evening. Now, the Children Bill of 2021 seeks to repeal the Children Act of 2001 to provide for penalties for denying a child the right to life, survival, well-being and development in Kenya. It is meant to protect children from violence and ensure that all their rights are protected. Violence against children in Kenya is at an all-time high, and this points to the weak enforcement of existing laws and policies. The Children Bill of 2021 seeks to address this challenge by strengthening the legal framework so as to protect children from abuse and also ensure that they are able to enjoy life in all its fullness. This is the discussion that we have tonight here on Front Row. My name is Sharon Momanyi, and I'll be introducing our guests in just a bit. Remember, you can engage us on social media. We have technical experts here in studio who will be able to answer all the questions we have regarding this, or even shed more light on issues that you would want us to engage in. Remember, the hashtag to use is Front Row, and you can also tweet me at Sharon_Momanyi. Now, joining us tonight for this discussion is Charles Nyukuri. Charles Nyukuri is the influencing, if you can have that introduction, Charles Nyukuri is the influencing and advocacy advisor at Plan International in Kenya. He is joining us via Zoom, and he's located here in Nairobi, rather, I beg your pardon. And we're also joined by Ibrahim Alubala. Ibrahim Alubala is the head of advocacy, Save the Children. Also joining us on the discussion tonight is Pauline Kerongo, and Pauline is Pauline Kerongo is the advocacy manager at SOS Children's Villages here in Kenya. Many thanks, gentlemen and lady, for joining us on this discussion tonight. Of course, a very important one and crucial in terms of protecting the rights of children here in Kenya. And I just want us to dive right into the discussion. And the bill, as we have said in the introduction there, seeks to address emerging challenges, preventing children from enjoying all their rights, such as increased cases of abuse and violence against children. And I want to start with you, Ibrahim, to just shed light on exactly the spirit of this bill. How exactly does it seek to enhance the rights of children here in Kenya?
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to share insights on the Children's Bill that is currently pending before the National Assembly. This has been a bill that has been in the works for too long. I think the first time a draft was attempted was way back in 2003, 2004. Remember, the Children's Act that is currently in operation was enacted in 2001. And it was also after a sustained struggle, because the initial attempts to come up with a unified legislation to protect children in Kenya began way back in 1979, and it's only up to 2001 that we had the legislation being enacted. But even after it was enacted, there were a lot of gaps that were identified, and some of them you've actually mentioned. And it was thought that there is need to develop another legislation that would address some of those gaps. And also the fact that when we enacted a new constitution in the year 2010, there were a lot of rights that were restated that had not been captured in the children's legislation. There were also a number of changes that happened. For example, we established county governments, which were assigned quite a number of roles to deal with children. And this had actually not been addressed within the legal framework. So there was need for us to enact a new law to address the gaps that were existing, and also address the contemporary realities, in the sense that we had devolution in place and we needed to have a legal framework that would speak to issues of devolution.
To bring in Pauline on the same question, being an advocate of children's rights and welfare, what would you say the bill is seeking to address? What are the loopholes and limitations of the existing legal framework?
Thank you very much, Sharon. And I just want to weigh in on what Ibrahim has mentioned. And just to acknowledge that, yes, the bill seeks to align children matters into, first of all, various laws and policies, and especially to tackle emerging issues such as FGM. We have online protection of children. We have concerns on how to take care of children during emergencies and so on and so forth. We also have concerns about social protection of children, the role of parents in taking care of children, but also taking cognizance of specific articles in the Constitution. And maybe I'll just mention a few. We have Article 43. We have Article 53 that's actually dedicated specifically to the rights of children. We also have Article 2 that takes cognizance of the international treaties and frameworks that are also part of the laws that we recognize in Kenya, and so on and so forth. So basically, this bill seeks to align to giving children an opportunity to ensure that those emerging issues that have come up will be taken care of, and also to appreciate that we have other laws that have been developed. For example, when you look at FGM, we have laws that speak to that. When you look at trafficking of children, we have the Counter Trafficking in Persons Act. When you look at the law on marriage, that clearly defines who a child is, and that you're not supposed to, marry off children because of underage concerns. We also have laws such as the Sexual Offences Act that is also going through its own process of review. So basically, this bill seeks to align itself and give protection and more enforcement on these emerging issues for children. Thank you.
Right, and that's an overview of what the spirit of this bill is and the kind of loopholes it seeks to address. And I want to bring in Charles, who's joining us from Kisumu, to unpack these issues one by one. And let's talk about the constitutional right that all the children of Kenya have, the basic right to basic education and a good health. And we know because of economic constraints that this is not really the reality for all of Kenya's children. How then can we make sure that this constitutional right is assured to all children?
Thank you so much for having me here. And, Section 12 of the Children Bill gives a lot of power to the cabinet secretaries from different line ministries to come together and complement the work to ensure that education is offered to children. We all appreciate that education is the foundation of all rights, the right to health and other rights associated with it, and that's why it's given prominence in as far as it's concerned. Now, for us to realize this, the first thing that we need is definitely legal framework. When it comes to education, we have sufficient legal framework, both policy and legislation that facilitate the promotion of education in the country. And the government, through the different line ministries, have done an amazing job to ensure that children are protected from this front. The government has also launched what is referred to as Edu-Afya. Edu-Afya basically is it's a policy that protects the health being of children both in secondary and in primary schools to ensure that they get what you may want to call health insurance when children are not feeling well. And the government has also opened doors for private-public partnerships where they have welcomed NGOs, people in the private sector, and they're able to contribute to education processes. And that's why you can see different companies with projects such as Wings to Fly and different scholarship opportunities that are being offered to children. So the bill has created a very conducive environment for people to engage with the education sector. Most importantly, the President Uhuru Kenyatta, last year during the Global Education Summit, he made commitments to increase the budgetary allocations for education by 20%. And this was supposed to ensure that children have holistic learning when it comes to achieving that right. That means recognizing children with disabilities, recognizing the fact that children have the whole process, meaning teachers also must be taken into consideration when we are thinking about building the education infrastructure. So the bill has already recognized education as a basic right, as captured in Article 43, as my colleague Pauline said, and it's basically breathing life to what has been guaranteed under the Constitution.
Right, Charles, and you've talked about education. It sounds like very promising strides and efforts that are being taken there to ensure that all children, can access basic education. And when we talk about health and access to good health care, we have the UHC program now rolled out to all the counties. Can we say now that, the children are safe in terms of access to, good health care?
I cannot say we are fully there, but I can say that we've put the necessary infrastructure in place. So what this calls us to do is right now we are in the moment where we are developing the county integrated development plans. We have to ensure that the needs of children are realized in such spaces. But also when we are also in a political season, so we must also look into the manifestos of the leaders to ensure that budgeting for children is not ignored. We have to put a lot of prominence to that, but also just appreciating the fact that children are not homogeneous. Different children have different needs. So a child in Nairobi has different needs from a child in Mandera, for example. And we can see also these other realities that are there in education. For instance, the need for specialized education for different children. So I think we are making strides, but we need a lot of effort in terms of putting money where it's needed.
Right. And just speaking about another issue that has really come up as much as conversations around this bill is concerned, and it's the issue of dealing with children and how we handle children, the rehabilitation rather of children in conflict with the law. And I want to shoot this question to Ibrahim. What are the key concern points around this? Children that are, are in conflict with the law of Kenya, and what are the proposals that the new bill has regarding this? Ibrahim?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sharon. Quite a number of proposals in the children's bill. First and foremost, there is statement of the right to legal aid. We know that a lot of children in conflict with the law have previously not been very well represented. We've had instances where children appear in court and they are not represented by advocates. So the children's bill restates that right by insisting that children who are in the legal process are expected to get the assistance of a lawyer to navigate through the cases. Now, if you look at the current Children's Act, which we are seeking to repeal through the Children's Bill, Section 77 of the Children's Act actually mentions that children may be entitled to legal representation. It uses the word may. And whenever you use the word may, it means that it's not a mandatory requirement. So what magistrates have been traditionally doing is to, assess and decide whether or not a child can be, afforded legal representation under the current regime. But with the enactment of the Children's Bill, it's a restatement of that right, and it also confirms what the Legal Aid Act has already put in place, so children will be entitled to legal representation. The second thing that the bill is very strong about is one of the provisions of Article 53 of the Constitution, which is around mixing children with adults in detention places. And we know that quite a lot, it happens quite often. If you go to some of our police stations, you'll find children being mixed with adults in police cells. Now, this is very dangerous because children are vulnerable. We know that some of these remandees can actually injure children in many ways. Emotionally, physically, sexually, and so forth and so on. So that has been guaranteed that children cannot be mixed with adults in custody. The other thing that the bill is very strong about is a new concept that we call diversion. Now, diversion means that a child who is in conflict with the law and who has not committed a very serious offense should actually not be taken to court as the first port of call. This child should be taken through what we call community-based support systems. You can imagine a child, for example, who steals mangoes just because they are hungry, for example. Such a child should not be taken through the rigorous criminal justice system, but we should get better ways of taking them through a community-based support system that would enable them get rehabilitated. So we have the concept of diversion that has been expressly set out in the children's bill, and it will help us actually deal with some of these children. Now, you know that even when we were growing up, it's not that children did not get into misdemeanors or they did not offend the law, but diversion still happens in the sense that not all children are taken to court. So it's right now what the law has simply done is it has actually clothed it with legality so that whoever is diverting a child is actually doing that from a strong point of the law and not just getting to a place where you are diverting a child without any legal basis. So diversion has been expressly provided for in our legal system. The other thing around children in conflict with the law is guaranteeing expeditious disposal of court cases, because we know that cases in this country take too long. The judiciary has been very supportive of late. We have seen, particularly with the new Chief Justice, she's been very strong on issues of conclusion of children cases through what we call children service weeks. But the law right now provides for minimum timeframes within which children cases are supposed to be concluded. So that if you are dealing with a minor case involving children, there should be no reason why that case should not be completed within 3 months. Or if you are dealing with a fairly complex case, like for example murder, where a child has killed another person, that case should not drag in court for more than 1 year, because these cases are supposed to be dealt with expeditiously so that children can continue enjoying their childhood. The other key thing that the bill does is it reduces the age of criminal responsibility. At the moment, the age of criminal responsibility is 8 years. So a child below the age of 8 years can actually be taken to court. The global practice is that age is too low. The recommendation by the Committee of Experts on the Rights of the Child has always been that age should be raised to 12 years. So this bill has proposed to raise this age from 8 to 12. So that children below the age of 12 years are not supposed to be, criminally culpable of commission of offenses. Thank you.
Right, and that's actually very comprehensive in terms of the things that we are looking at. And just before I let you go on that particular one, regarding the place at which the bill is now before it's enacted, are they still subject to debate? At which point are we actually at?
So we are expecting that this bill will be tabled in Parliament anytime from now, because it went through the first reading. We've been having members of the Labour and Social Welfare Committee picking public views. And kudos to the Labour and Social Welfare Committee, because they have consulted so many people, including civil societies. I know that children were consulted sometime last week. We had a very strong representation by members of the Labour and Social Welfare Committee, taking time to actually listen to children. And that is very instructive, because this is the first time we are actually seeing parliamentarians reaching out to children to just hear from them. So we are expecting that this bill will be tabled for the second reading, committee stage, and then hopefully it will be passed and it will receive presidential assent before we get into the general elections.
Right, and you brought up a very important point, which is including the children themselves and having the voices of the children heard in this entire process. And it is a thing that experts, as yourselves have said, is important for child governance, to make sense to the children themselves and for sustainability of such policies. And so, Pauline, does the bill speak to such a framework which, sees children involved in policy making?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. And just to add to what my colleague Ibrahim and Charles have also mentioned, specifically on child participation. Number one, as I said, the bill seeks to align itself to specific provisions of the Constitution. Article 10 speaks to the participation of citizens in this country, and children fall within that bracket of participation. So what the bill has done is that it recognizes that one of the basic principles, there are four of them, when we consider child rights and child governance issues, we have the best interest of the child, we have child protection and safeguarding, and then we also have child development, and lastly, child participation. So the bill takes into consideration that the views of children must be considered in all matters that affect them. And maybe just to take us back is to appreciate that as a country, we have what we call the National Guidelines for Child Participation of Children that were developed in 2008. And of course, they will need to be reviewed again to align themselves to existing realities. For example, the online participation of children and so on and so forth. But the bill actually takes into account that the voices of children are very important. And that is why when this process began on getting to seek the views of the public on what is good for children in this country, children have been mobilized across the whole of Kenya, from the 47 counties, representatives from different institutions, statutory institutions that are run by government. We also have private institutions, and then we also have children coming from schools and also those cutting across the board. For example, we have children in the refugee setups and also some who have different kinds of disabilities. So the bill actually recognizes that the voice of the child is very important for us. And then it's also to appreciate that what the Labour Committee has done is to be on the forefront to actually get the direct voices of these children. And the voices have been documented for purposes of just aligning to the different concerns and different discussions on the different issues that currently affect children within the borders of this country. So the voice of the child is very important, and we continue to appreciate what the Labour and the Social Committee is doing to ensure that the voice of the child is recognized as part and parcel of this process. But also just to appreciate and to perhaps invoke our leaders that the voice of the child will become a national concern and a national agenda, even as we talk about putting the children's rights at the agenda. We are talking about the political manifestos. We are also talking about the campaigns that are going on, the development of different laws and policies in this country. When you talk about allocation of resources for children, and this speaks to county budgeting and national budgeting, that the voice of the child must be at the center of everything that you're doing. So the bill provides this, and also to appreciate that there are different systems and structures that have been put on board. For example, we have the National Children's Assembly, and this is a platform that is managed or coordinated by the National Council for Children's Services and the Department for Children's Services, that provides children with an opportunity within the community to air their concerns and their views on different issues that affect them. And then, of course, at the community level, we have the child rights clubs where children gather within the community, for example, in the schools, just to discuss about different concerns. And also the bill, as it appreciates what the other laws have done, for example, the Basic Education Act, that actually talks about the participation of children when it comes to governance concerns in the schools, for example. It therefore aligns to some of these existing policies and appreciates that the voices of children is part and parcel of this process of reviewing this bill, of reviewing the law, right, and coming up with a new law for children.
Right, quite insightful indeed, Pauline. Thanks for that. And it's time to take a short break here on Front Row, as you have had very important conversation, matters to do with protecting and preserving the rights of the children of Kenya. So we want to take a short break here on the show, but I'll be back in just a while as we continue with it. Stay with us.